Hello IFLA, this is Ian Ibbotson. I'm gutted actually that I can't be there to present this in person, but Christina and Sydney and Nora all know much more about all this stuff than I do, so I'm hoping that they've enlightened everybody as to what's been going on. I've been asked to give a short update on the technical progress that we've been making in Reshare. I'm responsible for the development and the architecture overall, and so probably best place to talk about where we are on the ground. Reshare, I guess, is split into three major areas. There's a shared index, there's the request messaging and fulfillment piece, the heart of interlending, if you like, and then underpinning that there's a directory piece as well. We've taken as our base truth, if you like, the idea that we want to work in an open systems way. We don't want to lock people into a walled garden, and we don't want to create a system where we're kind of in control of part of the data, which means it's impossible to interoperate with other systems or impossible to interoperate with other partners that aren't in the network. So we've taken that inspiration of open systems and interconnectivity very much to heart, I think. With that in mind, we would like each of these three major areas, the shared index, the directory and request managing, to be able to work on their own. Obviously they work together as an overall system, but it's important that the components work and do their own job, and they're replaceable in fact. So the shared index deals with three major sub-areas, if you like, which is harvesting content from all the participating libraries so that we can create a unified view of the content. Obviously some libraries will want to use that, some libraries may already have a shared index and we'd like to be able to use that instead. But having the shared index was important for our initial user base. So that's what this does. It goes out to different sites, harvests the information, indexes and deduplicates the content, and then we also have a presentation or a discovery system which end users can use to search that shared index and to request items from it. It's important again that we draw a distinction between the shared index piece, the software on a disk somewhere, and the presentational piece, which is currently a viewfind index but could be any other discovery system. The directory is based on a distributed model, so the idea is that institutions can publish a directory entry and that contains everything somebody would need to know to interoperate with you on an interlending basis. In actual fact, it's not restricted to interlending. It could form the basis of other library applications, and there's nothing to stop you, for example, describing your OAI semantics in there and your real-time availability checking, and we might see some examples of that as we go through the directory piece. Ultimately, it's important, of course, that users are able to maintain their own directory entry, and that's a part of directory as well. So although a library may participate in the overall directory and network, and they could do that by handcrafting one of these description files, we also want to provide some software that allows people to manage them as a part of this integrated system. And the last piece, of course, is request messaging and fulfillment. As a community of developers, we've got a long history. A few of us were involved in the original IPIG, the ILO Protocol Implementers Group, and have been involved in the development of ISO 18626 and tracking that. So we're developing a protocol agnostic messaging engine, which is capable of using a number of different protocols, including ISO 18626, which is our base substrate, our base messaging engine, if you like, but also ISO 10161/10160, and where we want to, essentially a direct loopback, which is a very quick way to call other tenants in the same cluster. But our first adapter, our first protocol adapter, is the ISO 18626 adapter, and we want that to be the baseline for our interoperability. Obviously we've got at that level some other interoperability and integration, so we're currently using Z3950 and SRU for real-time availability checking, and we're using circulation interchange protocols to do things like borrower validation and to check items out. And we've been doing quite a lot of interoperability testing with vendors. That's going really well. So just in terms of the development update, shared index we've got a version 1, really solid progress. We have been working on some new algorithms to do deduplication and to create tokens that identify items to speed up the deduplication process. Directory services, we've got a version 1 complete with a FOF, friend of a friend style graph traversal. So we can start with an empty directory and we can point that empty directory at an entry or a person who participates in the network, and the robot will spider out and visit everybody in the network and build a picture of who we can interlend with and who's in the consortium. And in terms of resource sharing, we've got a version 1 happy path system, so we can submit requests and we can send back unfilled answers, or we can send back expect a supply answer and then shipped. So we're going really well. We've got NSIP integration for patron check, that's working, and we do have the real-time availability check piece going. So I've spoken long enough really without putting something on the screen. I'm hopeful that that maybe Sydney or the other guys can sit down over coffee with people who are more interested in this. Failing that, please feel free to get them to give you my Slack details, and I'm happy to take calls with anybody. This is the directory module, and you'll see that when this module starts up, it actually starts with no data, but it's seeded by going to a file which is just published on the open internet, which is this file that represents a test, if you like, of the PALSI consortium, just a few members to begin with. And you'll see that this file has some friends of a friend entries, which are other URLs out there on the internet. So our robot visits this file and then will visit all the friends of friends to build a full picture of the interlending network. Things like the ISO 18626 endpoints on the network, the ZTS950 endpoints on the network, and the local NSIP service. We've got OA IPMH in there as well. Once we've traversed that network, we end up with this list of institutions that we can use to do our interlending. And this is going to form the basis of not only our ILL messaging, but also how we can get a picture of the sort of real-time loading of the network, so we can do load balancing when we're trying to send requests. So that's the directory app. That's working quite nicely. In Reshare, we're following the folio idioms of trying to break complicated applications down into smaller task components. So you can see across the top we've got our Reshare components, and the two I'm going to talk about today primarily are the request and supply applications. I can very quickly show you the viewfind that is in development and we're using to test our shared index, and this has got some real records from Millersville in Pennsylvania. It's just a standard viewfind instance. There's nothing particularly special about it. This data has come from an OAI feed, it's gone through our deduplication process, and it's presented. And then we have this get it button, which is using OpenURL as the glue essentially between the discovery service and the interlending service. Because I'm demonstrating from my local machine now, I can't unfortunately show you an end-to-end process, but essentially what would happen is I would find a title I'm interested in, click the get it button, there's some authentication that happens, and then we move through to the supply app and the request app. In the request app then, you'll see I've got some requests currently listed, and you'll have to take it on faith that these could have been created using the process I've just shown, the get it button. And I've got a few test cases. So I've got this test case where I've completely invented a title, and the title is a non-existent title to show the not supplied use case. And you'll see that this has a state of unfilled. So if I click on the details here, you'll see that we've got some baseline details, and if I scroll down, we have our requesting lender string, or our requesting rota, as we might have called it in some situations. What's happened is I've identified some potential lenders, and I've then sent an ISO 18626 request message to the first supplier in the rota or the lending string. Bit of smoke and mirrors here. the requesting and supplying libraries are both in the same system but with different symbols, and that just makes it really easy for me to show you what's going on. And you can see that here we've got a corresponding request, a partner request if you like, for the title that I've just talked about, and this is a supplier view, so there are actually two requests in this system, a request view and a supplier view, and this is the latter one of those. What's actually happened though is that as a supplying system we've received that request and we have a component called the autoresponder. Autoresponder has detected that a new request has come in, and then it's used Z3950, and it's actually used Z3950 against the Temple server to say, oh, well, the request that's come in doesn't have a local system number, so I can't even try that as a strategy for looking this title up. But I can use some other strategies, and one of the strategies it's tried to use is a unique title match. And obviously, this is completely made up title, a non-existent title to show the not supplied use case. So that's come back with, no, I'm sorry, we can't find that in the catalogue. And this supplying system has responded with a supplying agency response message saying unfilled, and the reason is not held. You know, we just can't find that thing. So if we go back to requesting, this state of rec unfilled is actually set to that because we've received a supplying agency message that says, I'm sorry, we can't fulfill this. Now currently in this system we don't have the tick over activated that will automatically move us onto the next rotor, but once we turn that on it'll automatically go to the next one and the next one and the next one. Of course none of the libraries will be able to supply this because it simply doesn't exist. We've got some more interesting examples now though. We've got this title which has a status of rec expects to supply, and if we look at that we'll see that again we've got some test rotor entries, and the first one is in a status of expects to supply. So again I'm using the local system as both roles just to make demonstrating things a little bit easier. But if we look at this item, in fact let me close the details window, you will see that this item now has a call number and it has a location, and I think if I scroll on to the right a little bit it's got a shelving location as well. What's happened in this case is that we have been able to match an item using Z3950 in the local system, and we've used the OPAC1 record syntax to actually look into the details of that record and see if we can find a copy on the shelf that isn't on loan. And as it happens, we found one, and we found one in this location, so the New Schools Performing Arts Library, and we found a call number for it and a shelving location. So the autoresponder in this case has responded that we expect to pull, and this status is awaiting pull slip printing. So we have to do some work now to print a pull slip for the supplying library to go and fetch that. But if we go back to the request app, what's happened is an ISO 18626 supplying agency message has come back saying, yeah, actually we found this, we expect to be able to supply it. We're not treating that as a firm commitment that we will supply yet, because of course the pick list, the librarian might go to the shelf and find it's missing, so we have to say, sorry guys, we can't find it, try someone else. Alternatively, we might pick it and then we'll send a confirmation message that says yes, we will supply this. So you can see there are a few different examples of other titles, a book called Platform for Change, a book called Heart of Enterprise, and a book called Stories of Brain Injury and its Aftermath. And if we look at the supply application there, we'll see that in actual fact for 3 of those cases we have been able to identify an item in the local catalogue. The supplying app actually knows nothing about these locations at the New School when the system boots up, so New School Offsite, New School List Centre Library and New School Performing Arts Library. What it's doing is creating a local record that represents the library system's location once we get that information back from the real-time availability check, and then we're going to use this as the basis for our pick list printing. Pardon me. So I mean that's essentially the message, and where we're at now then is we have the shared catalogue piece working. We've got our ISO 18626 protocol messaging going backwards and forwards, and that's based on data that's come from the directory service. We've got our real-time availability check going in the responding library so that we can automatically try and locate items and route the pull slip printing to the appropriate location. And we've got the NSIP integration that lets us, on the request support side, automatically validate the patron to see that they are a patron in good standing and they're allowed to submit requests. Going forward, we're going to be doing some more work on the directory for load balancing. We're going to be tying together the shared index so we've got multiple locations and that we can produce more optimized lending strings and more optimized rotors. And we'll be completing the set of ISO 18626 messages so that we can cancel requests and send shipped messages. My colleagues at Knowledge Integration have been working on the supply app. So, the shipping app, that's what I meant to say, so that we can create shipments which package together lots of supply requests, so we can bundle 15 books together into a box and ship them off to another library. So I think we are making really good progress, and I think we're certainly on target for our alpha late fall, and I'm hopeful that we'll actually get some libraries genuinely doing requests and testing this. That is all I've got to show you, but I'd be really pleased to talk to anybody on Slack or over email. So, Sydney and the guys should feel free to give my contact details out, and I'd be very happy to talk to anybody in more detail about this. Thank you very much for listening. Goodbye.